Hey, good morning. Today we are going to go over a couple more problems where we are changing fractions into decimals where we don't already have the denominator of 10 or 100. Now I know this was kind of tricky and it's new, so we're just going to go over the most important steps that we need to take when doing these kinds of problems. So I have 3 samples on my handy whiteboard here. Do you like my setup? Let's start with 3/5. So 3/5, I do not have a denominator of 10 or 100. But I know that I can find an equivalent fraction by making 5 a denominator of 10. So in order to do that, I have to do the same thing to my denominator that I do to my numerator. And I know that if I multiply 5 by 2, I will get 10. So 5 times 2, 3 times 2. I now get an equivalent fraction of 6/10. And if I have 10 as a denominator, it is super easy for me to switch it into a decimal. 6/10, how do I write that as a decimal? 0 and 6/10. Done. So let's look at our next one, 3/4. Now, 3/4 is a little bit trickier because I can't multiply anything by 4 to get it into 10. So that means I know that I have to go to the hundredths place. And what times 4 equals 100? 25. I know that because I know how to work with money, right? We talked about this yesterday. 1/4 is 25 cents. There are 4 quarters in a dollar, so 4 times 25 equals 100. Always remember that little trick. So if I'm multiplying 4 by 25, I also have to multiply 3 by 25. 4 times 25, we already know this is 100. 3 times 25 is 75. So I now have 75 100ths. Very easy to write as a decimal. 0 and 75 100ths. Now I'm looking at this one down here, 7/20ths. Again, I need to get this denominator to be 10 or 100. Now, I could divide 20 by 2 to get 10. But does 7 divide easily into 2's? No. So I think I'm going to work with the hundredths place again. And I know that 20 times 5 equals 100. So I'm going to do 20 times 5, have to do the same thing to my numerator. 7 times 5 equals 35. 20 times 5 equals 100. 35 100ths can be easily written as a decimal, 0 and 35 hundredths. Okay, so we just did 3 extra problems with fractions that don't have a denominator of 10 or 100. What happens when we have mixed numbers? Let's go through a couple of those. All right, hold on a second. Erase, erase, erase. So let's look at, my setup here. Let's look at 2 and 1/4, 3 and 3/5, and 1 and 1/2. Okay, so now I have 3 new problems that are mixed numbers, and I want to make them into decimals. So when working with mixed numbers and decimals, we know that our whole number is going to say our whole number. So that's going to be to the left of our decimal point. So I know right off the bat, 2 is going to be my whole number. Now what about 1/4? Again, I can also say this as 1/4, and we've been talking about these comparisons to money. I know that 1/4 equals 25 cents or 25 100ths. And the way that I can do that is by multiplying 4 times 25 and 1 times 25. That will give me 100 as my denominator. 4 times 25 is 100, 1 times 25 is 25. So I know that 1/4 is 25 hundredths. So I can write that over here to the right of my decimal point, 25 hundredths. So now my whole problem, 2 and 1/4, is written as a decimal point as 2 and 25 hundredths. What about 3 and 3/5? How am I going to get that one to be an easy way to write a decimal? Well, once again, I'm going to make 3 my whole number. Whole number stays the same whole number. Now 3/5, fifths, I can easily make fifths into tenths. I know that 5 times 2 equals 10, and if I do the same thing to the denominator that I do to the numerator, I will get an easy way to write a decimal. So I'm going to do 5 times 2 and 3 times 2. 5 times 2 equals 10. 3 times 2 equals 6. So 3/5, the equivalent fraction is 6/10. Very easy to write as a decimal. So I already have my whole number, 3, and then I write my decimal, 6/10. So 3 and 3/5 is a mixed number, is 3 and 6/10 written as a decimal. What about 1 and 1/2? I know we talked about 1/2 yesterday in some of the examples that I did in Notability, but let's go through it again. All right, once again, I still have my whole number. That doesn't change. So I need to make sure that I write that 1 right away. I noticed in some of your workbook pages yesterday, that got a little tricky for some of you. So don't forget your whole number. Now 1/2. Again, if I multiply 2 times 5, that equals 10. I can easily write that to the 10th place. Then not 10, 5, sorry. 2 times 5. Then I do the same thing to my numerator. 1/2 equivalent fraction is 5/10. That's really easy to write as a decimal now. So I already have my whole number 1, 5/10 in the 10th place. 1 and 1/2 as a mixed number equals 1 and 5/10 as a decimal. Now we're going to do just a couple more problems because we also need to go from decimals into fractions. So let's just do a couple of those, and then hopefully this will help you with your assignment for today. So let's see which problems I picked here. We're going to do 3 and 6/10 and 4 and 35/100. So my dog's coming over to say hi. Sully wants to do fractions and decimals too. Okay, 3 and 6/10. I can write decimals as fractions by easily using 10 or 100 as the denominator. So 3 and 6/10 can easily be written as 3 and 6/10, just like we say it. Now, we know from working with fractions that we should always simplify. Can we simplify 6/10? Yes, we know we can. We can divide both 6 and 10 by 2 to simplify that fraction. Don't have to worry about my whole number. Remember, when we simplify, we're just working with the fraction part. So after I divide 6 by 2, I get 3. 10 by 2, I get 5. So 3 and 6/10 written as a simplified mixed number is 3 and 3/5. Okay, last one. 4 and 35/100. Remember, when going from decimals to fractions, the first step is to write our new mixed number with a denominator of 10 or 100. So 4, that's my whole number. 35/100, I will write as 35/100. So 4 and 35/100 written as 4 and 35/100. Once again though, I should probably simplify this. So how do I simplify 35/100? Well, I know that I can divide 35 by 5 and I can divide 100 by 5. Always do the same thing to the numerator that we do to the denominator. So if I divide 35 by 5, I get 7. 100 by 5, I get 20. Move my whole number over. I know that 4 and 35/100 written as a simplified mixed number is 4 and 7/20. Okay, if you have any questions about any of this and you want some help, we could do a one-on-one conference today and I can go through some of these problems with you, or you can just send me a message and we'll go through some of them that way. Good luck, fourth graders.